welcome to our 70th automation hour. And let me just make sure. All right. So if you are joining us for the first time, all lines are muted, and please post your questions to the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community. We will be posting a link to the recording as well as the deck sometime after the session. Oops. Here we go. Right, it's just a little frozen. Hold on. Right, there we go. Okay. So we have booked out all our sessions for the rest of the year. So if you haven't registered for it, I highly encourage you to do so. Even though you cannot attend live, you will get a link to the recording after the fact. So we have several MVPs as well as community members presenting. We will start soliciting requests for 2020 pretty soon. So if you do have a business use case with a cool automation solution, please direct message us and we'll get you on next year. And we cannot bring this free webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And here are your co-hosts, David, myself, and Rakesh. And if you happen to be going to Midwest Dreamin' next month, we will be there. All three of us are presenting, so stop by and say hi. And with that, I'm excited to bring on Dominic Ionadi. He is a first-time presenter, and we're looking forward to his use case today. So let me hand it off to Dom. And now you should have control.
All right.
Yep, I see your screen.
Wonderful. Hey, Jen, Rakesh, David, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on Automation Hour. I'm really happy to be here. Wishing everyone on the call a happy Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, and hopefully you're enjoying the summer so far. So before I get into describing the use case and actually demoing what we've built out, just a little bit about me. So as Jen mentioned, I am a first-time presenter on Automation Hour. I've been working on the Salesforce platform for a little bit over 5 years. And I guess, like many people out there, you could describe me as an accidental admin. And the story I often tell about, when I joined my current firm, the hiring manager who recruited me mentioned that, they're putting in this new CRM system, and he'd like me to help out as a BA because, he kind of done some CRM implementations before. But he said, and I quote, "I don't want you working on it forever." Well, here we are, 5+ years later, and pretty much every minute of every day since that first day has been spent working on Salesforce and learning more about it. So I would normally start off, kind of describe myself as self-taught, but that is really not appropriate because I think I definitely would like to say that I'm a community-taught admin. One of the things that I learned very quickly was the power of the community and just how much great information and how many resources are out available to new and experienced admins, and there's just so much great collaboration taking place in the various Trailblazer communities and on blogs and community events and things of that nature. So definitely would say that I am community taught and a self-proclaimed Automation Hour superfan. So one of the first things that I discovered was Automation Hour and have learned a ton. I try and tune in every time there's a webinar and learn something new. I have had the pleasure of presenting at various events. I've spoken at a couple of Toronto World Tour events, and most recently at True North Dreaming, which was the inaugural Canada-wide community event. So big shout out to Scott, Sarah, Zarina, and the entire True North Dreaming team. They did an awesome job, and they will be back next year in Vancouver, and hopefully some of you people will come out and watch it. So when I'm not working on Salesforce, in terms of hobbies and just passing the time outside of My wife and kids, I am a big football fan, so love the Green Bay Packers. Had the chance to go down to Lambeau Field a few years ago. I try and see them whenever I can. I also run a youth flag football organization in my current hometown of Whitby, so we've got about 300 kids playing flag football, which is awesome. It's a great way to spend a Sunday when I'm not working on Salesforce. And of course, been to a few Dreamforces. The picture in the upper left-hand corner is me and some of my colleagues down at Dreamforce last year. We had a great time. And again, outside of the family, my pride and joy is my golden retriever, Lambo, who is right down here in the corner. Definitely open to always talking to people in the community. So definitely check me out on LinkedIn if you have a question. If you want to just exchange ideas, I'm always open to talking to people about Salesforce. So definitely check me out. So briefly, what we're going to go over today, I'm going to describe the business use case. It's pretty straightforward, but I think it's a great example of something that you can do fairly quickly and get big benefit using out-of-the-box automation capabilities built right into Salesforce. Talk about, besides the business use case, some of the options that we considered when we were presented with this challenge, and then the actual solution approach, a couple curveballs that we ran into, and obviously go into the live demo itself. So again, fairly straightforward business use case. You may have solved something like this already at your own firm, or definitely experienced this as a consumer, where you're informed that your contact information has been updated. So change to an email address, change to phone number, address, etc. We want to alert our clients. Being in financial services, privacy and security are definitely top of mind all the time. So we want to make sure that our clients are informed of any changes to the contact information that we have about them, whether they initiated or whether we did, just to alert them to that fact. So again, fairly straightforward on the surface. Some of the additional requirements that we had to contend with were, when we had an email notification change, we wanted to send it to the prior email as well as the new one, which kind of makes sense. If someone changes your email address maliciously, informing the person who did that doesn't really get you that far in terms of security. So definitely want to send it to the old and the new email address. Make it personalized and branded, obviously look like a legitimate email and not some kind of phishing attempt or something of that nature. So definitely in line with company branding standards, including personalized information to the recipient, as well as their contact information of the person that they can contact back here at the firm to get in touch with if they had any questions or if they were concerned about the change being made at all. Being in Canada, we have 2 official languages, so had to have variation based on language, English and French, as well as the type of change being made. So email address change versus another type of contact information change, doing that just a little bit differently. Like most automated processes, you want to have some way of suppressing those automated alerts from going out in certain circumstances. So that's a pretty simple way to do that if you're doing data cleanup and things of that nature. Obviously, track and report on everything that's taking place. So built that out as well as part of the solution. And really big at the time was getting it done quickly. Part of what was driving this was we were actually going to go live with an external-facing client workflow where clients could actually interact with the system and update their own information right into Salesforce. So it was very important that we had these controls in place before launching that new process. So real quick, some of the options that we considered when we first started down the road here was maybe dumping all of this information into a back-end database and having some code or some stored procedures to then email information out to clients and sort of manage that outside of Salesforce. Then looking at Salesforce specifically, maybe some triggers, some Apex code, things of that nature, and a more of a customized solution to actually deliver those emails out to the clients and track all this stuff. And then, of course, using declarative or out-of-the-box features, which is ultimately what we went with. Real briefly, and again, we'll get into some of the details when we go through the demo. Pretty simple in terms of the implementation, building out some workflow rules with some email alerts and some automatic field updates. But being in the B2C space, we rely on person accounts, and person accounts don't always behave that great when it comes to email information. So you can't actually suck in the email field into an account workflow automatically. There's an idea out there. It doesn't look like it's getting that much traction, but if you have a chance and you feel like uploading it, I definitely encourage you to do that. Salesforce itself, actually, in their official documentation, has the workarounds listed, so I don't know if that's ever going to be something that gets solved, but nevertheless, it's an idea out there. So we relied on basically some formula fields and process builder to sort of wrap the whole thing together to actually get where we wanted to get. And just before we do get into the actual demo, I wanted to show off these pretty cool stickers. So all you Salesforce Stickers fans out there, these are two unique ones. We are the home of the 2019 NBA World Champion, so we've got a Toronto Raptors championship sticker right there, as well as now former Raptor Kawhi Leonard jersey on the sticker here, and he will actually be the center of our use case. So with that, I'm actually going to flip it over to my org, and we'll get started. And just a quick check, are you still seeing the screen okay, everyone?
Yes.
Awesome, thanks so much. So let's go with our sticker guy, Kawhi Leonard. So we've got a real simple page layout here for our person account record. Let's use some contact information, phone, mobile, email, and address. So sadly, Kawhi will have a new address effective immediately. So we're just going to change that real quick down to the Staples Center. And get this guy done and saved. Pretty simple. And of course, did not go through. You run through this thing 75 times before the demo, and it obviously works, right? First time you do it live, doesn't work. Not sure what's happening here. We're good. Okay, just real quick here. See if we can get this guy to work. All right, well, not too cool. Let's go to another record. I'm sure we're good here, clear. All right, let's go to Pascal and change his phone number. See what we get. This is very, very strange. Weird. Just going to really quickly check my deliverability settings. I know that we did this earlier and everything was set properly. Unless someone's gone in and changed it on me, which they haven't. Here. Process builder active. All right, well, this is what it actually looks like. Not sure why it's not firing. It was working about 5 minutes ago. Nevertheless, when we look back at Pascal's record, we see that his language preference is French. So in this case, we're actually sending out the French branded email. And for those of you who don't speak the language, this is basically telling you that your email address on file here at Burgundy has been changed. And if you didn't actually trigger this change, or if you had any other questions, to contact your investment counselor. So what we're doing here is we're just looking through to the account owner's user record, grabbing the name, getting their title and phone number, email, as you would expect, and firing that off. And then, of course, we've got our boilerplate disclaimer down at the bottom. On the English side would look just like this. So the previous change that we had made, again, contact information at Burgundy Asset has been changed or updated. If you do not recognize this activity, contact your investment counselor. So again, one thing that we had to do is, it's one thing to pull in the name and phone number, which are universal, but the title would actually come out differently depending on the language. So pretty simple solution there is we just added a French title to the user record and populated those for the appropriate users to make sure that it actually gets pulled into the email. Okay. Similarly, I just wanted to show you right back to that email change. So this is based on the general contact information changing, like a phone number or an address. The actual email, you'll see here, is going to both addresses. It's going to the new email address as well as the prior email address on file. And I'll kind of get under the covers a little bit and show you how we actually built that out. So again, pretty straightforward. Just start with our workflow rules component. So what we want to do with our first workflow rule is capture any contact information changes outside of the email and then trigger that email alert. But we didn't want to have multiple emails going out. So pretty typical example of a change would be someone's changing their address and their phone number at the same time. As these field updates were taking place in Salesforce, we didn't want emails to go out multiple times to the client. So one for the phone number, one for the address, and then again, address having multiple fields. If they were changing the street and the zip code, let's say, again, firing off 2 emails wouldn't be a very good client experience. So we actually did this in 2 steps. Our first, I'll zoom in just a little bit. Our first workflow rule looks at any of the fields that are changing. So for certain conditions, we didn't want to send this out for every single person account record. So there was a couple dependencies on if they were an actual active client as opposed to, let's say, a prospect, and what the line of business was, because the 2 lines of business that we were operating under have different requirements for this. So you'll see that we're looking at a couple different fields in our workflow rules. So the first is, because this is the English notification format, we're looking for the language, it's not French, okay? And then again, are they an active client? So we're referencing a custom field called status. And this is our kind of line of business indicator we call client classification. So under these conditions, as well as any change to any of these fields. So that they change the phone, mobile, billing street, city, as you would imagine, all the different address fields are here. And again, we didn't go right away with an email alert as the immediate workflow action here. What we're doing is we're actually updating this field called notification date. And it's our way of controlling the fact that we just wanted to send out a single email per day for any change that were taking place. So again, maybe not that elegant, but pretty simple way of doing this. Just create a formula field called notification date. And what we're doing as part of the workflow is we're setting the value to today. And then what that does is actually, we'll go back to our workflow rules. we're actually checking for any changes on that particular field. Okay, so contact change takes place on any different field. We're actually setting that notification date value, and then when that notification date value changes, we're actually going through with the actual email alert. We've got our notification email alert right here, and templated the way we saw on the email, just personalizing it with the information from the account first name, and then looking through down into the account owner's user record to get this other information. So let's look at the email change specifically. What we actually did here, again, with the sort of complications around using email on a person account in a direct Salesforce workflow, we just took the approach of using Process Builder. So similar to kind of the two-step process for sending out the contact change notification in the first part, we're doing something similar with email. And this also kind of supports the requirement for having tracking on any email address change. So what we're doing is we're looking at the account object here. We relabel account relationship in our org. That's why you see relationship in a lot of places, or relationship owner. But it's just a standard account object. And whenever we've got a change taking place on the email based on these conditions, so again, is the person email value changing? Yes, it is. And again, those same conditions around status of the client and line of business are present here in our process builder. And again, the edit override being set to false. So I may have glossed over that on the first workflow, but that's basically how we get around not sending the email when we want to, or not, I should say, not sending the email when we're doing some kind of data cleanup or in those special circumstances to meet that requirement. And we generally do this with a lot of our validation rules. Pretty handy. Just check that box, and it's one of the conditions that we look at whenever we're firing our validation rules on the account object. So just back to our process. Again, what are we doing here? We're creating the email history record. If we look back, we have one here. We change our email. How about that? Second time works. Don't ask me how. There's our nice email address change. Process builder never fails me. So we've got, again, our Mr. Siakam's French client. So we've got a French branded email here. When we look back at his record, we've got our email history tracking taking place here. Now, one question that may come up is why not just use the standard field auditing out of the box in Salesforce? There's really a couple reasons for it. One is our users did want sort of one place to hone in on any email changes because they're so sensitive. So we basically created a custom history component here within the account object. The other reason is we do track a lot of fields, and even though we're Shield customers and we can go well above the 20 out of the box tracking fields that Salesforce allows you, it's still we basically hit our upper limit. So for those two reasons, primarily, we went with a custom history approach here. So if we dig into one of these guys, again, our process builder, we go back to it, is creating the email history object, and it's pre-populating all these fields basically just with field references back to the person account. So who is the contact, what was their language, and what are the new and old values. So we just have a formula back on our person account record to set the prior value whenever there's a change. Again, fairly straightforward, but kind of gets you where you need it to be for this particular use case. All right. So once we create our history object, then we've got our actual process to generate or send the email out. So again, custom object here on email history, whenever a record is created, and then we're just making a couple decisions based on the language. So again, we wrote the language preference down into that custom object, and we're just basically deciding what to do based on the value in there. So is the email history's language preference not equal to French? If it is, then we're sending an English email alert. So whether they are don't have a language preference set, so default will be English, or explicitly stated as English, we're going to do that and send the email alert, which is just our standard email alert template. And likewise, if their language preference is French, then we're going to send the French email alert notification, which is here. Just set these up right in here. We're the recipients, again, new email and old email, which we're writing into that history record because of what we did in Process Builder. Okay. Just go right back into that record for a second. When I touched on those notification date values that we're setting, we just keep them down here in the system information section of the record, more for admin use. We also use the automatic BCC copy, so our mail server does keep a copy of every email that goes out as well. But this makes it very easy for clients or internal users rather to report on anything that's taking place. Again, they can look at the email history record and they can report on any changes based on this field here. And then once they can, they can reasonably ascertain that, clients were notified on that particular day of something happening. So again, if we wanted to, just for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to wipe this field out. Just to demonstrate the edit override. So again, if we had, entered this incorrectly, maybe the client already received an email notification that their contact information had changed, and we realized that these should actually be 8s. We just inputted it incorrectly. We don't want to alert them unnecessarily. So we can actually just set the edit override, and again, that's that first condition in the workflow rule that we saw earlier. And if I just go in here and change this, those should be 8s. I just entered them incorrectly. You'll see that the notification date field did not get updated in that case. We've done our data cleanup. Record's back to normal the way it should be. So we remove that, and then if there's some other change on the record, then we would actually go back and see that updated. And then we're back into there again. And there's the new email. Okay. So this thing has been up and running, maybe not quite a year, but pretty close, maybe about 8 months or so. And I really haven't had to mess with it too much. It sort of does what it needs to do. I am thinking about maybe rationalizing, combining these two processes together and see if I can just do it in a multi-step. So that's probably, where it will end up going. But again, pretty straightforward solution, does what it needs to do. Not a lot of magic, easy to set up and administer. I think it's a, pretty good example of simple automation that even in, entry level or new sort of admin can get up and running fairly quickly, deliver some good business value. And then likewise, maybe doing something a bit more sophisticated in terms of our branching out based on language code. But again, everything's running pretty well, but looking to definitely always make things better. We are sort of running into, not really running into issues, but when I look back at our process builder, we do, sort of at the point we sort of built, like most new people do when you start with these processes, built out multiple process builders on the same object. So also definitely looking to rationalize that and see if we can bring some together so that we're actually looking at multiple scenarios and dealing with them appropriately, and not not having an unnecessary number of process builders running on the same object. So that'll probably be the next iteration of this particular use case in terms of how we solve it. Just want to make sure I covered sort of what I wanted to. It went a little bit more quickly than expected, so I apologize for that. But definitely open to taking any questions, or if somebody wants to see something in a bit more detail. I did kind of run through it pretty quickly. Just let me know.
All right, so as a reminder to folks, if you do have a question for Dom on his presentation or just a general process automation question, you can post that out to the Salesforce Automation Hour on the Trailblazer community, or you can use the questions section that's in the GoToWebinar. So I'll give a few minutes for folks to do that. In the meantime, Dom, were there any limits around emails that you run into when automating this?
In terms of actually generating the email, or just dealing with it in terms of one of the conditions on the flow?
Any type of like limitations or limits that you had to deal with for emails?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the one that's jumped out right away was on person accounts. Actually using email as one of the kind of in the workflow rule. Didn't allow us to do that. And that's a big reason why we ended up going the process builder route. Originally, I did sort of go down the road of doing what Salesforce suggested, which was basically creating a formula field. And how you would do that is, I'll just show you real quick. On our record, or on our object, I should say. I want to make sure that it's actually still in this org. Yeah. So it's kind of what they recommend here. is actually just creating a formula field where we're actually writing to, taking the sort of standard person email field and writing it into here. So formula that pulls the person email value and presents it at the account level using external notifications. So what we did there is just basically did a one-time load of all our existing account records, copied the email value, sort of the standard email value into the email formula value, and then had a workflow rule for changes. Should be in here. There we go. To do an update on that value. So this particular field update updates the email formula field when the email is changed on a private individual. That's basically just a record type for our person accounts, and it's using external notifications. So that was one kind of gotcha that we ran into. The generally, though, the emails were all being issued. Just definitely, and I guess this goes with any automation solution, one lesson learned is really ensuring that the users understand very well kind of what's happening. We used to have like a custom address object, which would then have sort of automation built around it to update the standard account address. And what users didn't realize was, even if they were making a slight change on the custom object, because of the automation that was taking place in the org, it was actually updating, showing the account addresses being changed. So that happened a couple of times where, users didn't realize that, and then email would go out because they didn't understand how all the pieces fit together. So definitely when you're doing anything like this, especially when you're notifying external parties or clients, you want to make sure that you understand how all the pieces fit together. And sometimes there are other things. I think in this particular case, we actually had some Apex that was running for an old process that people didn't realize would actually kind of factor in this case here. So definitely things to watch out for. In terms of other things that we use, again, so we use Flow on, when we've got some Flow processes built out for when users are interacting with data and needing to create multiple records. So we do that in a few different business use cases. Again, heavy process builder users, as you saw by our very long list of active processes in the org. Looking to clean that up a bit. Approval processes, workflow rules all over the place, and then again, custom code solutions. Originally built out by our first partner, but wherever we sort of run into limitations just on the declarative features, we will go that road, but our preference is always to use the out-of-the-box features wherever we can.
All right, let me refresh the Trailblazer community and see if there's any questions there. So while we wait to see if there are any other questions, how did you get started with declarative process automation?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, again, it's just as you sort of skill up and learn more about what's possible in Salesforce, you want to do more. So I guess when did Process Builder come out? Was it 15 or I can't remember exactly. But once that came out, I was really sort of drawn to it. I like the sort of ease of use and the way that you can build out processes, pretty flexible. So yeah, just learning from, again, trailblazer groups out there, workflow automation, automation hour, reading as much as I can, and sort of, I guess, getting better at it the more you do. I find, and I kind of talk about this a lot when it comes to automation, whether it's something as simple as an approval process or when you're getting into more complicated things like some complicated flows, is you just start small, and what tends to happen is that users really get excited about all the clicks they can save and sort of the power that they can get out of the automation tools. So it sort of starts to snowball from there, and I kind of talk a lot about building an automation culture where maybe when you start off, at least certainly it's been true on our journey, Salesforce adoption in general, but specifically around automation. Early days users will say things like, "Hey, can we? Is it possible? Can we do this on Salesforce?"
Okay, Robert has.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Robert has a question here. We do a lot of record builds, uploads, and I find some process builder configurations don't like being triggered during bulk imports. Do you have any suggestions, best practices to avoid this?
Is he looking to actually trigger them or not trigger them, I guess? Or is that clear?
He's looking to trigger them.
Oh, okay. I have not actually run into that. Typically, if we're doing a bulk upload, it's maybe to clean up data. And generally what we're doing in those scenarios is we're actually inactivating the process builder. So I actually haven't had specific experience about wanting to trigger something in bulk and not being able to do so.
All right, last call for questions.
And actually, while I'm thinking about that, I'm just thinking of other things that we've run into with bulk uploads. Typically when, again, we've got related records, we've got quite a lot of data in our Salesforce org. So if we're updating a child record because we do have system integration taking place, and what we have run into is we've got some automated data loader processes running where if there's a fair bit of Apex or workflows or just generally things happening with the record as it's being inserted or updated, that you do run into issues around unable to get exclusive access to the record, for example, or record locks and things of that nature. So I don't know if this really answers the question, but depending on how he's getting it in, but if Robert's sending it up by data loader, then the only thing I could suggest is maybe decreasing the batch size. So we've actually had to do that where we've got some really heavy processing taking place and we're updating, let's say, 10,000 records every single morning. We've had to do things like really get down to even batch sizes of 5, for example. And I know that other people I've talked to have had similar issues and they've even gone down to batch sizes of 1, if in fact it's coming in by data loader.
All right, I don't think there are any other questions out there.
Yeah, so the only other thought that I just wanted to, sorry, go ahead.
Yep. No, go ahead.
No, yeah, so just before the question come in when I was talking, and again, just around automation and sort of building that automation culture, again, typically it starts off with users asking, can this be done on Salesforce? And as you start to build out more solutions within the business, regardless of the type of automation that you're delivering, I find that the thinking starts to shift to, well, why can't this be done on Salesforce? And that's really where you start to get some value and some really good adoption. And we've definitely seen that automation is a big driver for that.
Great. All right, well, thanks, Dom, for coming on and presenting. This is a pretty cool use case that you showed us, and interacting with person accounts. I know that there's a love-hate relationship with person accounts for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're at a point in our relationship with person accounts that, we kind of understand each other, I think, pretty well. So, but yeah, definitely it was the first few years really running into things, but they're all right.
Well, thanks again for presenting, and definitely come back and present other use cases for us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's a real thrill to be on Automation Hour. And again, if anyone thinks of questions later or just wants to talk in general about Salesforce, about automation, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anyone. So thank you so much.
Great. And with that, this ends our call. Thanks so much. Bye.